What's going on, SA Gamers? This is Captain Curtis, and we are in our second week of our Christmas weekly devos. Am I saying daily? Weekly devos, and our series is called Messy Christmas this Advent season. And this week's title is "You Weren't Meant to Be the One Who Keeps It All Together." Now, I want to start with a question. How many of you in your home have a cleaner? Especially at Christmas, someone who's a cleaner is a little bit different and makes things a little bit anxious. So I tend to be that person in my house. So let me explain what I mean by a cleaner at Christmas. So as soon as we wake up on Christmas morning, we go downstairs, my wife and I get a coffee, and we start doing presents. But I arrive with a garbage bag and a recycling bag. And the minute somebody opens a present, I take the old paper and I put it in a recycling bag or a garbage bag. And as soon as we're done, the whole room is cleaned up so that there isn't an ounce of garbage left. And it doesn't even look really like we've opened any presents. And I'm sure that probably takes a little bit of the fun away from my kids, but I just need to have it clean. And I know that's a little bit weird, but that's how I deal with Christmas messes. And that's what we're talking about, but much deeper messes, aren't we? And we know that sometimes Christmas does bring those messes to the surface, stuff that's already been going on at home. You know, maybe things like you're a little bit lonely, and you've been that way for a while, but Christmas break, without your regular routine and schedule to distract you, maybe it can sink in. There may be things at home are already falling apart and a little bit broken, and Christmas brings all of that back up to the front and center. Or maybe it reminds you that someone is gone from your life, and that can be a challenge. Or maybe too much unstructured time in the same place can give you the opportunity to think about old habits, and those old habits come crawling back. And sometimes we try to respond to these messes the way that I respond on Christmas morning. Right? I take control and I try to fix things as quickly as possible so that they all stay in order. We try to manage the messes. You know, for example, we try to manage our image, right? We post things to make it seem like family life is perfect for us. We know that we can't control the mess in our family, but we can manage it by what we portray on Instagram. Or we make sure that everything looks just right. Or maybe we manage the expectations. We try to do everything that we can to make everyone happy. We feel like we're the one responsible to make sure that everyone gets along. Maybe we manage relationships. We use all kinds of tactics to try to get people to do what we want them to do. We manipulate. We say things like, "I can't believe you would act like that." We tell our parents, "You're ruining my Christmas break." We play the victim, ignore people, yell at people, whatever it takes to manage the people around us. Or maybe we just manage behavior. Maybe some of you find control by doing everything perfectly. You do exactly what your parents expect of you. Maybe some of you are the opposite. You act out in negative ways in order to show the authority figures in your life that they're not in control of you. The list could go on and on. We all have our ways of managing the messes, especially during the holidays. The good news is that what we're going to talk about today is not only helpful in the areas where we try to manage the messes, it's helpful in all other areas of life too. And it has the potential to really change the game on how we view things this Christmas. If you are unfamiliar with the Bible, no worries. I'll get you back up to speed really quick. It's divided into two sections, the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament are the books of the Bible that were recorded what happened before Jesus walked on the earth. The New Testament consists of the books that account for the time that Jesus walked on the earth and beyond that. But ultimately, whether it's an Old Testament or New Testament book, they all point to Jesus. The first four books of the New Testament are called the Gospels. They are the accounts of Jesus' life when he lived among us on earth. And these books are important because they are all about Jesus. And this is huge because Jesus was God. So, if you want to see what God is like, all we have to do is look at Jesus. Matthew is the first gospel, and it records what happened after Jesus was born. Let me break it down like this. The traditional Christmas story, that's chapter 1. If there's a nativity scene at your grandma's house, there was a fancy one at my Nana's house. That's what the chapter 1 is all about. Jesus is born in a cave. Mary, Joseph, and some animals were gathered around. This is what Christmas pageants are all about. Today, we're going to turn the page to chapter 2. In fact, literal chapter 2 of Matthew starts by saying this. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod. That's from Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. So now we learn about a guy who's in charge when Jesus was born, King Herod. He's called Herod the Great. He crushed opposition. He was wealthy, smart, and strong. He did some brilliant things, but he was also in love with power. His fits of rage and jealousy led him to do all kinds of things. Verse 1 continues. It says, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. So, some wise men came to town. Maybe you've seen them in your grandma's nativity scene. They're definitely a part of the Christmas story, but they're more chapter 2 than chapter 1. When they show up, they want to know where the Messiah is. The Messiah is the leader the Jewish people had been waiting for that would solve their problems and help them break free from the people that had ruled over them. Jesus is that Messiah, and he came for all people. Stop and think about that for a second. Jesus, who is God in human body, came to earth like God came to earth and dealt with all the human things. Bruises, stress, puberty, and pimples. In fact, after Jesus came to earth, lived, died, and came back to life, one of his greatest followers explained it all this way. In his very nature, he was God. Jesus was equal with God, but Jesus didn't take advantage of that fact. Instead, he made himself nothing. He did this by taking on the nature of a servant. He was made just like human beings, and that's from Philippians 2. King Jesus came with humility in order to help us. As we go back to the Christmas story, that's who the Magi are looking for. They're asking, where's Jesus? The man who's going to save us and lead us. We want to worship him. So Matthew continues, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed. By this, Matthew means the news that another king has been born. Just like that, the current king is threatened. Herod was in charge, and now there was competition. There can't be two kings. The last thing Herod wanted was to lose control. His control of the kingdom, his future, his wealth, and his power. So he panicked. Before we judge, let's all admit that in some ways we do that too. We try to manage the messes, and when we feel like we're losing control of what's going on around us, we don't like it. When we can't manage image and people find out that our family isn't perfect, we hate it. When there's too much unknown and it feels like we're out of control, we feel anxious. When we can't manipulate people into doing what we want, we get angry. When we can't make everyone happy and be everywhere at once, we feel overwhelmed. We don't like our sense of control being messed with. Herod started slowly unraveling, and he went to the wise men with a sneaky plan. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I, too, may go and worship him. Herod obviously had no desire to worship Jesus. He would have immediately had Jesus killed. The wise men never came back to Herod, never sent him a report. They saw Jesus, celebrated him, then went a different way back to their hometowns. When Herod realized that his little plan didn't work, he lost it. He did something so horrible it turns my stomach. He ordered for kids 2 years and under who could possibly fit Jesus' description to be killed. Was his plan successful? Of course not. Did it create a lot of pain and chaos? Absolutely. Now I want to be really clear. I know Herod's example is extreme, but there is something in his story that we can't miss. Herod represents what happens when we try to be Lord of our own lives. When you think about it, This story is really a tale of two kings. King Herod was concerned about losing his throne. He wanted to protect and maintain it. King Jesus arrived in a manger to invite everyone to a new and better kingdom. King Herod, he created a temporary fear-based solution. King Jesus came to restore chaos for all of eternity. King Herod made things messier. King Jesus came to bring peace. King Herod felt threatened by Jesus. King Jesus felt no threat. He came to help Herod and all humanity get rid of those unhealthy things in his heart and become the fullest version of himself. When we think that following Jesus is about losing ourselves, it can feel threatening. But when we realize that Jesus came so that we could finally have real joy, peace, hope, and love, everything changes. Herod obviously never realized this. His life ended in a sad way. He was never going to be king forever, no matter what he tried. He wanted to make it all happen on his own. He tried to manage the mess, but it didn't work. It never does. The same that's true for him that first Christmas is true for me today. And it's true for you too. Think of it this way. You weren't meant to be the one that keeps it all together. You weren't meant to be the master of the mess. You want to fix and control things? Me too. But that's what makes Christmas so powerful. It's not about us keeping things together in our own power. It's about focusing on the only one who can truly lead us to life the way it's supposed to be. The King who was born and placed in a manger. The King who, out of love for us, came to live among us. But what could that look like in the middle of the messes we're currently facing? Well, here are a couple of ideas. Number one, loosen your grip. This is what Herod failed to do. He was so intense, worried, anxious, and threatened that he let the worst parts of him get the best of him. We think that controlling and managing things takes away anxiety. In reality, it has the potential to increase it. When we learn to let go and put it in the hands of God, we can actually feel more at peace and rest. The second thing we can do is trust the King who humbled himself. Jesus is secure enough in who he is to be the humble King. Out of his love for us, he came to earth, lived his life among us to show us the loving heart of God, then displayed his ultimate love by dying on the cross for our sins. We can let go and trust him with everything and anything in our lives. In a perfect world, all the messes would just go away. Or like me, we could just clean it up as quickly as possible. But, as we learned through Herod, that doesn't work. This Christmas, we have a God who is right there with us. In the middle of the mess, God is present, God is loving, and God is powerful. You weren't meant to be the one that keeps it all together. God can manage that mess this holiday season. You don't have to be the king or lord of your life. That's God's job. After all, God is much better at it than we are. So as we finish up, I want to leave you with this question. Is there anything in life you're trying to control right now? Well, I hope you know that we're praying for you. That if any of this resonates, if life is a bit messy, please put it in God's hands. But also know that we're here. And if you need to message any of the leaders from SA Gaming or your own youth leader, please do it and talk to somebody. We love you, and we'll see you next week.